Hello, everyone. My name is PNP, and I'm the founder and CEO of Amotions. Amotions is a platform to help you and your team be more effective, improve relationships, and help you attract and retain talent and master soft skills. Today, we're very happy to have certified leadership coach Lisa Reese here. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
You are so welcome. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Lisa, you have extensive experience leading teams in the federal workforce. Would you like to add anything to your introduction?
Sure. Yes, I do have extensive experience. I have over 3 decades of leading teams. And also, my background is quite interesting. A lot of people didn't realize that I have a strong budget, finance, strategic planning cadre of skills that I have honed over these years. And about, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, I decided to change career fields to become a leadership coach because I really wanted to help leaders who were struggling and also organizations who were floundering or weren't as successful as they wanted to be.
Mhm.
So so I have had quite a long career that I've learned a lot, and I'm really excited to be sharing some thoughts with you today about change management.
Sounds great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, change management, it's actually a common topic that I heard that are challenges that leaders face in different organizations. Curious what kind of changes have you seen your clients or people have gone through? Some challenges that have heard, including, for example, changes that come with a high growth startup or changes that come with a large corporation that's undergoing restructuring, leadership change, or strategy change. And then in that case, like, what are the suggestions you have for leaders who are going through those?
Yeah. Well, change is inevitable. And it is also really difficult. It's difficult to lead change. It's difficult to manage change.
Mhm.
And just those things that you were mentioning about startups or mergers or things like that. But when you think about how the world has changed, even recently, think about COVID and how that has brought such a different dimension into the workplace. Being in the federal government for many years, we were required to come in the office every day. It was an 8 o'clock to 4:30 job, and we had meetings. We collaborated with our colleagues. Our boss was accessible to us. And then all of a sudden, things started to change a little bit. The workplace started to change. We had younger people coming into our workforce, which brought a brand new dynamic. People who grew up only on the internet. That's all they know, the iPhones and the iPads and things like that, the way they communicate, through Twitter and Insta and all those platforms. And at work, we had to change our ways of communication. Before, remember those days of we actually picked up a phone?
Right.
And now it's about, Teams and about chatting and about Slack. So the way that we work has changed and who we work with has changed
Mhm.
because we really are in this now telework environment where what we're doing right now is the norm. And that even though leaders and executives are excited about the workplace, workforce coming back to the workforce isn't as excited. So when you add all of that onto where we are in our society, where we are with what's happening in the world, I call, and this is not a term that I coined, but we're living in this VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Right.
And so it really takes a special leader and an organization who embraces change to really, have the skills that they need to be able to do this. It's very complicated and complex.
That's right. What are the skills and capabilities do leaders need to go through?
Well, it
Yes.
is about understanding that they do live in this complex world and that things are not going to go back the way they were. And I think that that is sometimes difficult for leaders who are comfortable with leading the way they did. So, what it requires is a leader, an executive, who is, first of all, open to change, but also understands how others may be feeling about change. What I've found over the years is that people are reluctant to change, even though we know it's good for business. We know that we have to stay fresh. We constantly have to be innovating and changing. But our proclivity to change is actually resistance because our brains crave certainty. Our brains crave peace and calm. And so when things start to become volatile, a leader needs to be able to recognize in their people that there's something deeper going on. And so I feel that one of the biggest skills that a leader and executive can possess is about emotional intelligence. And I know a lot of people are like, well, that's something that's been around for years. Why do I need to do it? Or even they think that they are. But what I'm talking about is our ability to connect to other people, the people on their workforce or their clients or their customers. Are they picking up on these emotional social cues? Are they really understanding how people are feeling? Because sometimes we make decisions and people are, we think that they're going along with us, and all of a sudden we're caught off guard because emotion happens. So when you're saying to people, we need to change, oftentimes what I hear is change is hard because it requires everybody to change. People see it as not always being better. That's change just because for change's sake. Mm-hmm. So it's not always viewed as positive. It's not always viewed as something that is welcomed. People can see change as confusing. They can see it as a threat. They can see it as, what, I'm not good enough, or we weren't good enough that we have to change. So, and it can also create like a perceived or actual loss to people. I'm losing something that I valued. So I feel that where emotional intelligence comes in is that we have empathy and compassion for others. We use it to connect to people and to ask them how they really are doing and to understand, why do they feel the way they do? And then finally, once you have all that information, is how do we now manage that emotion in myself? Because I might want people to change, get frustrated. And how do I stay open and able to really go deeper with people to connect to those people? So I think that that is one of many. There's others as well that go with change management. What does an executive have to possess?
Mm-hmm. So to summarize, one is to be open to changes. The second is to be attuned to how other people feel about changes and pay attention to their emotions and have empathy and how to connect deeper with them in the emotional level, right?
Exactly. Because when you do that, it really does help people realize that you care about them. Right. And that when you focus on what other people value, what their values are, and you get to know them, right, then you start to then realize that you can engage them and motivate them through what's important to them. Right. So for an example, coming back to work, I may be very hesitant because I've gotten used to the flexibility, and you're taking that away from me now. Mm-hmm. Now, if I know that flexibility is important to you as a leader, I will, talk about this, like, how can we make this work? And so it is really about honing in your skills to connect to other people, to understand them, and then to move them through their values, not cramming your own values or your own ideas down their, throat, so to speak. It's really about listening too. Listening is a wonderful skill too.
That's great. Yeah, that's really good point. And as follow-up, what kind of questions or how would you ask somebody so they would actually tell you about their values and what they care about?
Yeah. So first of all, you need to show that you care. People can see through you. If you're not being authentic,
Right.
People can smell it a mile away.
Hmm.
So, first, you have to take a genuine interest in your employees to show that you care about their personal life and their professional life.
Hmm.
And also to share about yourself. I see oftentimes leaders will shut down. They won't share something personal, or they won't share how they're feeling. And what happens is it creates a barrier. And so I say to leaders, show some humility and being vulnerable
Right.
and being open, which is really hard to do, because if I'm the boss, I have all the answers.
Yeah.
And really, one of the things I find that's almost liberating is when I tell leaders, you can't possibly have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. And think about it, when you have hired all these wonderfully talented people, think of the knowledge that they have. Because a leader, really, what they do is they leverage strengths, and therefore the weaknesses become less important, because you're focusing on what you're good at and also a leader needs to be visionary. It's really important to have their own vision and to be passionate.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying that every leader has to be charismatic and extroverted, but I'm saying that you need to be able to communicate in moving ways so that people can see where they're headed, and then to invite them into the conversation. Because I see a lot of times when decisions are made on behalf of others, you feel left out and not disrespected. And it's not intentional, but I think sometimes an executive or a leadership team may think, oh, we're all smart, therefore we're going to execute, rather than inviting stakeholders to the table. And when I say stakeholders, I mean anybody who touches the business, anybody who, we've heard this thing about NASA when they're interviewing, why is NASA a great place to work? And when they ask a janitor, what do you do? He says, I send people to the moon. That's the kind of employee we want, right? So I really feel that if a leader can connect and listen, be humble, and invite everybody to the conversation, can really go a long way into reaching their goals.
That's very good. That's I think that that applies in the cases of leading change and implementing change, but also in other scenarios as well. And for someone new to management and leadership, someone who just got promoted from an IC to management and leadership, I think related to what you're saying is sometimes it's a little bit harder for them to figure out how to let go of what I was doing as an IC,
Mm,
how do I delegate
mhm.
and now become a manager and leader. Do you have
Yeah.
any thoughts in that area?
Oh, sure, sure. So that was my career. When I think about it, I became a supervisor at the age of 25. And I was supervising people that were much older than I was. And it was really intimidating, and I was unsure of myself. And I realized that I needed to learn and develop, self develop. I couldn't just think that my smarts, my intelligence was going to get me further. Because what I've seen, and maybe you've seen it too, is that when we promote people, we tend to promote people for their technical expertise.
Right.
And what happens is, yes, I was very smart in finance. That's why I got promoted. I was smart. But how did I relate to people? And because if you don't have those soft skills and you don't develop those soft skills and you don't learn hard skills that are more management focused, if I just concentrated on accounting and I learned all the greatest accounting things, I wouldn't know how to lead people. So the first thing I had to get over was that I wasn't going to be the smartest in the room technically, because what I had to do was develop my team. So I was learning the softer managerial skills, and my team was learning the finance, the accounting, the budget, those technical skills. And it was my job to give them the resources and time so that they could technically really be experts in their field.
Right.
So that to me was really an aha moment, that it was no longer about me. It wasn't about the awards I got or the recognition I got. It was about, how do I make my team shine? How do they, to elevate them? And so then when I became a middle level manager, I was managing first line supervisors. And then I became a third line manager and a fifth line manager and a sixth line manager. So as I was moving up, I realized that I didn't need to know it all. And I really needed to count on everybody else. So therefore, building your team, and that's where the communication comes in. How effective of a communicator was I? Was
Mhm.
I clearly communicating the priorities of the company? Was I communicating my vision and and also, did I have a strategic plan? Because you can say to people, this is where we're headed, but if you don't have it on paper and you're not tracking it and you're not putting resources behind it, I always say to people, tell me what's important to you, and I'll know it when I look at your calendar. Meaning, who are you talking to? What are you doing? What are you focusing on? Because really, it takes that leader who trusts their team. You have to have trust to give them that autonomy. We talk about all the time empowerment, right? We talk about engagement. Those are not magical words. These are real concrete things. They're not that touchy feely, fluffy stuff. This is stuff that if we don't do as leaders, we're going to lose people's motivation, their intrinsic motivation, their engagement, and they'll leave. They'll go somewhere else.
Right.
And so many people leave their bosses. When you look at management studies, it's a high amount, like 60% of people, when asked why do they leave, it's because of their boss. So if that doesn't tell you that we have work that we need to do, and that's kind of why I became a leadership coach as well, because working one-on-one with an executive can really help them discover new things about themselves.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but I know that in the higher you get up to up the corporate ladder, the more those softer skills, those relationship skills, and being, humble and vulnerable is really important, and a great listener, because together, when you listen and you can put the pieces together, and all of a sudden you've aligned everybody's strength, it can really be powerful.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. All these are very good points in terms of when you become a manager and leader, your focus is more in developing, helping your team learn, and you rely on your team to do more of the individual contributor works and not trying to do all of that yourself.
Exactly. You can't do it all by yourself. And if you are, then what kind of message are you sending to everybody else?
Hmm.
I always say, a leader is a role model. How are you showing up at meetings? How are you? I mean, you're being judged all the time because everybody's looking to you. You are their leader. So are you empathetic? Are you compassionate? Are you open? Are you a good listener? Are you emotionally intelligent? Are you positive? All of these really, really matter. And the higher up, the more important they become. So relying on just your technical skills and also looking at, well, we did it before, it's going to work again. With everything changing so rapidly in our world, we have to be open to changing our own selves and the way we look at the world and the way that we communicate with the world. I can tell you that I've changed dramatically. We didn't have the internet really when I was, first starting. We didn't have this workforce. I was the young one, and now I'm the more senior person. I have evolved to embrace, and instead of looking at other people as the other, they're on the outside. I keep asking myself, how do I include them? How do I lift up their strengths?
Right.
How do I discover their strengths? And I do this through a couple of tools. I've became certified in appreciative inquiry. So emotional intelligence is probably I would say if I were to choose one leadership skill, I would definitely say that emotional intelligence has to be the number one, because that's
Mm.
where you build the trust and the connection and the connectivity to people and the empathy and all that. But the appreciative inquiry piece is a way of, how do you look at the world? What is your philosophy? And there's a framework around it. And I've used this with companies on a large scale.
Mhm.
I've used this with, we've used this in cities, and I'm using it right now in my town. We have a town of 12,000 people. They wanted to do a change initiative. Like, how do we create the vision of the future? Where are we headed as a town? We used the AI framework to actually gather everybody's thoughts and energy and brought them together to co-create our future. And so now we have an exciting strategic plan and I'm involved in this, helping them now put, the words to action, because people get excited about change. Like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen change initiatives fail. And they fail because there's not given enough emphasis by the leadership on it. So it's all of a sudden it was important, but then leadership doesn't talk about it anymore.
Mm.
There's nothing documented. There's no project plan or a strategic plan that helps guide the organization. People get burnt out because you rely on only a few people to make the change happen rather than everybody. So that it can fail that way. There's no urgency or communication around it. And so what AI does, what appreciative inquiry does, is it's constantly helping us keep the focus on this change, and that the leader and the leadership team and the employees and everybody who touches this organization are co-creators. And so therefore, everybody, you have that momentum and excitement and passion. And I think that when we can do that, when we can grab that energy and bring it together, it's unstoppable. And that's where I see organizations succeeding. And I've personally been involved in change management where I've seen it succeed. And I've also seen it where I've been a consultant and gone in and helped people. But then though, that urgency, the passion, the momentum, the money, the resources to get this off the ground faded away. And therefore, as a consultant, you can't do much. It has to be the leadership that makes it a priority. And when they do that and they show people that it's important, great change can really happen, because I've seen it and it's really exciting.
That's a good insight about what could make changes happen, and what could make changes fail. Sounds like the leadership, starting from the leadership, has to be fully engaged and embraced, and then the whole organization is taking part of that. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and something related to that, in terms of communication, um, you mentioned that having these like soft skills like emotional intelligence or hard skills, and then management skills, these are very important. And then for a leader, how could they balance being assertive and kind of, I have this vision, I want changes to happen, for example,
Sure.
balance being assertive and kind of
Mhm.
making their voices and points very clear, and balance that between being assertive and being like patient and being
Mhm.
empathetic and listening to other people's
Yes.
opinions and voices and feelings. Like,
Yeah.
what are the good ways to balance that?
Yeah. Well, first we need to acknowledge that both need to exist. I
Mhm.
mean, both are important. So we call this a polarity. And there's a great work done on polarities, and that's another tool I'm certified in. It's about balancing two things. So I think the one that people can relate to the quickest is home and work. How do you balance that? But just like you said, assertiveness and being patient. So there are upsides, there are benefits to both.
Mhm.
right? So what we do is what we want to do is we want to leverage the upsides of both. So if we were to picture an infinity loop, we would want to be on the high side of assertiveness, and then we come down and we go on the high side of being patient. So when you look at what are the benefits of being assertive, I bet you that if I asked an executive, they could say, well, being assertive, we get things done, and it's quick, and it's, they have all these reasons why assertiveness is really good. And then when you go, well, what's good about being patient? Well, it allows me to slow down. It allows me to listen. I can be clear in my conversation. So there's upsides to both. So what I tell people is, do you know when you're on the downside of that one polarity? Meaning, what if you were only assertive? What would some of the warnings and downsides be? Maybe people would think that you don't care, that you don't want to hear them, that you're standoffish. Like there's some downsides, right? Being patient, they could say, well, you're wishy-washy. You don't make decisions. You're indecisive. So what we need to do is monitor, like, where are we in this polarity? And we can do both. We just need to recognize that there are circumstances when we do have to either be one or the other. And as an executive, to slow down, to ask yourself, what's needed right now? Should I be assertive or should I be patient? And if I find that the answer is assertive, 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 assertive over and over, are there some warning signs? Are people giving me signals? Am I burnt out? Is something happening where I feel I have to do it all, the weight of the world on my shoulders? If that's the case, then you're experiencing the downsides, and therefore you have to take action to say, I really, in my next meeting with PMPN, I'm going to be patient. I'm going to listen. So really, it is about recognizing the situation, what it's called for, if there's any warning signs, and if there are, to take action steps to bring yourself up to the good parts of both.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. These are good points. That means it's require being observant and taking time to reflect and look for signals around the situation, around people's
Right.
reactions, and then see how you can adjust your behaviors to match
Right.
what is needed at the
And that's where emotional intelligence comes in,
Mhm.
because what we do is we're monitoring how we're feeling inside and
Right.
how the other person is, and to recognize, like, why do I feel this way? Why am I being assertive? The
Mhm.
reflective piece of emotional intelligence. And then finally, like, well, what am I now going to do about it? And so that's really important as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's very much true. And if someone is in, for example, in middle management, they're not like the senior leaders of a organization, but they're wanting or hoping to understand, like, for example, what are the senior leadership thinking about, what are the goals and concerns, for example, like, regarding changes. What are good ways that they can approach to get that kind of information, given the condition that they might not have the opportunity to talk to a CEO one-on-one, for example. How would they be able to gather enough information to help themselves and
Mhm.
their team?
Yeah. Well, so here's something kind of fun being in a virtual environment. My dog is insisting of coming into my office. So being flexible and laughing it off, I'm just going to let my big old Chesapeake Richard come on. Here she comes. Oh, yeah. All right. See, this is one of the things about being live and being on video.
Mhm.
So anyhow, so your question was about how does a middle manager communicate with others when they don't have access to their leader and they're not able to. Is that what your question was?
It's not just about communicating, it's about understanding. So it's like, how
Ah,
do they understand the goals
yeah.
and concerns of senior leaders when there are, like, for example, changes going on, or business strategies or things going on. They want to understand first before they know how to respond to
Mhm.
to what's to the goals and concerns of the senior leaders. And I mean, once they have the information, then they can think about how they can respond and also communicate with other
Right.
people. But how do they even get the information from?
Yeah. Well, first thing, does the person they're communicating with trust them? Because if you know that as a leader and you're talking to people or anybody for that matter, if there's not trust, there won't be open communication. You won't get the full story. You won't get everything. So you need to ask yourself, have I spent enough time with this person that they trust me? And because that's really important. That's number one. If there is trust, it's how can I listen better and to listen to understand, not to one up them, not to have a preconceived notion about what the answer should be. I don't know if you've ever been in a discussion with somebody and they're kind of asking questions that lead you to their answer.
Mm,
And so what I say is, how can you ask a neutral or a positive open-ended question? I work a lot, and that's another thing that I work with is like, how do you reframe things from challenges, what's going wrong,
mhm,
to opportunities?
right.
So are you able to ask powerful questions?
Mhm,
And those powerful questions usually begin with what or how, and to ask authentically. Again, it goes back to authenticity, is, what are your thoughts? Or I was thinking about this. How do you feel about that?
mhm,
And then when they say something and you don't agree with them, it's relaxing and staying open, right? Noticing that you're triggered, like, oh, I'm gonna, that's wrong, or I don't agree with that.
mhm,
Instead, what it is it's saying, how can I understand? So I could say things like, help me understand,
right.
or tell me why you feel that way, or how did you come to that conclusion? Because what you may think is the reason could be very different. So I would say listening, asking a great question. And even if you don't agree, it doesn't have to be an either or. How can it be an and? How
Right.
can we maybe incorporate both ideas, or at least acknowledge, because sometimes you can't do always what the other person wants or you don't agree, and
That's
you can say, you know thank you for your thoughts, I'm going to give it some consideration, and then you decide and you let them know how you came up with your decision. But
mhm,
I would say it is about, do they trust you? Are you listening? Do you know what's important to the other person? Are you asking good questions, great questions? Are you truly listening? And then are you taking action? Because you can listen all you want, but if you don't do anything about it, then it seems like, why bother with that person? And then you've lost their trust.
that's right. Yeah. So to summarize what you just said, it's very important to be able to ask great questions, more open-ended questions, and not have an agenda or pre-coded answer in that. And you're asking question to truly understand what the other person
Yeah.
um, is thinking about and feeling, and then from there you can build trust with the person.
Yeah. And that takes a lot of self awareness of a leader or an executive, because if we don't recognize, especially the emotional intelligence, that I'm like talking a mile a minute, or my body language is looking very stern, I'm not smiling, there's so much that I could be doing that will turn other people off. So it's about being self-aware, is how am I showing up? Am I relaxed? Am I stating what I, clearly? Am I asking good questions? Am I listening to them truly?
Mhm.
And you really need to be prepared. A lot of people go into important meetings and conversations terribly ill prepared, because they assume, because they're smart, that they can just, you know, oh, I'll have the answer. It'll be easy. I'm smart. But what happens is they get emotionally triggered. We call that like the amygdala hijack. And all of a sudden, people are shutting down because they're getting upset or frustrated or whatever. And that just leads to, horrible discussions. So making sure that an executive, a leader is self-aware, how they're showing up,
Mhm.
is really important too.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Being able to be aware of your own your actions, of your behaviors, and your emotions and energy. Yeah, that's a very good point. Um, just as a wrap up, what are the effective ways for someone to like learn to be more self-aware or have the emotional intelligence and have the um, kind of the management leadership skills that they need?
Yeah. Well, I I always find that a 360 is a really good tool to as a leader. I've taken several throughout my career, and I always say that they can be either affirming, like you knew that, I knew that about me, or they could be awakening, meaning I had no idea that
Mhm.
this was what people thought.
Right.
So I like sometimes to give a leader, even a leadership team, a 360 that will show areas that maybe they need to work on. Like, for example, if I give myself high scores in everything and my team, either my boss or my direct reports, give me lower skill, that to me is a disconnect. So and how come I'm not coming across as the leader I think I am? Sometimes we have people who overestimate or other people who underestimate, and maybe they're not leveraging their awesomeness. They're not doing the things they're really good at.
Mhm.
So I think a 360 is a great way. I also do an emotional intelligence certificate assessment, because what I've seen is that a lot of people are taking like an EQ test, which is about a self-report. How do I see myself?
Mhm.
And it also incorporates things like my personality, my social skills, and optimism and positivity. What I do is I'm certified in a tool called the Mesquite, which is Mayer Salovey Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test. And I've given it to quite a few executives who are surprised by the results, because it's an ability-based model,
Right.
meaning the answer that I give is compared with the answers that 21 emotion researchers gave. So you either know the answer or you don't. You can't fluff it.
Mhm.
So I find that when I give the emotional intelligence feedback, the executive, they there's like a kernel of truth, and there's something that they go, oh wow, this just showed up for me and I wasn't aware of that.
Right.
So I do feel sometimes that an EI assessment can be really helpful. I also feel that coaching can be helpful, coaching one-on-one with an executive to really break through some of their barriers and challenges, and to help them maybe with new perspectives and things like that. I do a lot also with leadership teams, where I've done a 360 with the leadership team, which can be very effective, because now you're looking at it as a whole team.
Right.
Yeah. So there's many things that can be done when it comes to, how do I as an executive raise my, um, skills, and not just, I don't deal really with the hard skills, even though the emotional intelligence test is a hard skill. EI can be measured. It's like an IQ test for emotions. But I really feel that if leaders focused more on their soft skills, the relationship, the trust building, the empathy, the positivity, how to reframe things, the vision, if they can do that and role model it and have their teams do it, and then it just keeps going out and out to the whole organization, where
Mhm.
they've effectively changed their culture or improved their culture into a place that helps them reach their goals, especially the ones that require a lot of change, because
Of
that's
course.
difficult.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I mean, for handling change, another thing that you mentioned besides emotional intelligence is appreciative inquiry. Can you give a brief description of what appreciative inquiry is, and how would
Yeah.
someone be able to learn that effectively?
Yeah. So I Like I said, I was certified in this tool. It really is a framework and a methodology and a philosophy. It's kind of like this overarching construct called appreciative inquiry. And appreciate means that we appreciate people, we appreciate the world, we appreciate our strengths, who we are, and that we align those strengths so that we can all feel that we're part of this wonderful system. We are human breathing systems. And so it really focuses on the people part of it, not the widgets, but the people relationship piece. So we can use it to identify a topic that needs to be changed.
Mhm.
And a lot of times what we do is we focus on what's wrong. For example, I just flew yesterday and I could focus, the airline, like let's say they lost my bags, right? So you could have the airline, come together, all the executives to focus on how do we fix this problem? We are losing bags.
Yeah.
But if we can reframe that challenge into an opportunity of what is it that we really want? Well, really, when you think about it, I just want a great customer service experience. I want, and that includes that my bag's on time, the airline's on time, the gate agent's there, the jetway's there. So all of a sudden, I've taken this problem and I've made it an opportunity to look at globally that we want to improve the customer experience. So just that shift of a problem to an opportunity, that's where the brain takes over. Because if we're focusing on problems, we shut down. Cortisol, all that stuff that's flowing through our system, adrenaline, and we're like, maybe we're feeling angry or anxious or frustrated. But if we can focus on the opportunities, all of a sudden the possibilities open up and we start to collaborate and communicate more effectively. So I think that is a powerful tool of AI. The other is about large change initiatives where you want, like I was saying, the city of Tampa, what they did is they wanted to change their future, and they had a AI summit where they invited hundreds and hundreds of people to come in. And we were talking every stakeholder, from children in the community, educators, public servants, businesses, everybody that touched Tampa, tourists, were in the room dreaming about where do they see Tampa in 5 years or 10 years, and how can they align their strengths and where do they want to go? So it's a tool that you can dream together. You can use it to discover about each other what our strengths are, and then you can line all those strengths. So it's actually a framework and methodology that it's really cool. And I also use it when I look at how do I ask questions. There's a lot of books about, the art of the question, a more powerful question. And I have an encyclopedia of questions that are just about, how do we ask questions that really start change? Because questions are powerful. There's principles in AI, and one of them is about what we choose to focus on appreciates. And that is so true. You've known when you've been in a meeting and somebody asks you a question and it's out in right field, you're like, that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. So I think that we can use our questions to focus in an area, but an open-ended question that gets people thinking and hoping and dreaming. And so that is, in a nutshell, kind of what AI can do. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah, thank you.
And I also, one more thing I forgot, I also use it because of, when you grab everybody together to dream of the future, I also use it as a strategic planning document. I do something called SOAR instead of SWOT, which we all know of. I use an AI approach, which is our strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. So it's not that we're not looking at threats or weaknesses, but what we're doing is that we're looking at our company or our organization through the lens of positivity and through what we want more of, not the things we want to avoid, but what we really want to achieve. And so our mindset is in a growth mindset, and we're able to achieve better things. So I like to use SOAR instead of SWOT.
That's very good. That's like kind of think about the possibilities and the positive side of things, and how do you think about like the goals and outcomes you're dreaming about or
Mhm.
aspire to, and then
Mhm.
what are the actions then you can take to get there. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
I use it in my personal life too. This isn't just for corporations. You can use in I use it a lot in my life. What is it that I want and my husband wants and my family? And so I'm always looking at how do I create my best self. And so you can use that in your personal life. And I think it's especially during these last couple of years,
Yeah.
it's been a lifesaver for me to
Mhm.
because if you focus on what's wrong all the time, it
Yes.
can really be a slippery slope. And so I choose to focus on and I think gratitude comes in there.
Yeah.
So important to focus on gratitude and not forget. The biggest thing I'm teaching right now is self care. It's
Mm.
really important that people take care of themselves. And the long-term things we know important, right? The exercises, sleeping,
Right.
the meditation, mindfulness slash spirituality, social support, exercise, all that. But there's also, those are the things that you need to be checking in. Like, am I taking care of myself? Am I
Yeah.
filling up my emotional reserve? That's what I call it.
That's right.
Because when you're depleted, you need to do something that will fill you up. And it could be as quick as, looking at a photo of a loved one or making a quick call to somebody or going for a walk, which I'm about to do with my dog, So those are all things that we can do. And like I said, executives and leaders are such role models. If they can model that in their life, it really sends a strong message to others that taking care of themselves is really important right now.
Yeah, that's very good point. It's like being grateful and appreciative of what we have, and the positive side of things, but also kind of taking a pulse of our own energy level and emotional state, and then
Mhm.
spend time to take care of ourselves, and when we need, so that we can be at our best self. Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. Really
Yeah.
appreciate that you share so much insights with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm happy again to talk to people who want to learn more or, dream of their future. I'd love to do these things. That's when I'm at my happiest is when I'm helping other people.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Think for any individuals or teams that are interested in helping themselves to be the next best version of themselves or the team, um, come back please for more resources and ways that you can work with coaches like Lisa on emotions. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.